somebody. It's well. Good afternoon, esteemed fellows. Hello and welcome. Dr. Paul Greenberg and myself, Dr. Leroy Simpson, are your fabulous UAGC session hosts. So it is our great, and I do mean great pleasure to introduce our esteemed colleague, Haley Sampson, our Associate Director of Faculty Engagement at UAGC. Haley, welcome, and we look forward to your session. So tell us how culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Carefully. It does so carefully. Thank you for that introduction, Leroy. I appreciate it. Um, Good afternoon, everyone. I know you've had a full day of learning about the culture of care today, and I'm hoping that you will bring your insights to that conversation, to this conversation. So I'd like to share a little story about my first experience with recognizing the impact of organizational culture. So I was a baby dean of student services at a small campus here in Colorado where I live. And it was a privately owned institution, and the president was flying in to visit our campus that day. And our campus director was frantically running around trying to balance her duties as a campus director um, and all the other things that come along with the president visiting your campus. But in this particular instance, she was tasked with going to pick the president up from the airport. And I watched what she was trying to do and balancing, her time and her duties. And if you're picking up the president, you probably want to go clean your car. And she had children's events to be at for her kids that afternoon at their school. And I said, oh, and she had to bring them back to the airport as well. And I said to her, I was trying to be helpful, and I said, maybe we could just get them a taxi, and the taxi could pick them up from the airport and bring them to the campus and take them back to the airport. And I felt this sort of change in the air. Uh, and she stopped and she looked at me and she said, but that is not the NAU way. And I think in a nutshell, to me, that describes what organizational culture feels like. It's the things we do, sometimes without even realizing why we are doing them. I mean, at that time, I didn't realize that that was why she was going to pick up the president and drop him back off at the airport that day. But it started to drive home for me that organizational culture describes what we do, sometimes without even knowing why we do it. But before we go any further, Leroy introduced introduced me. I'm Haley Sampson, and my role at UAGC is the Associate Director of Faculty Engagement. So what that means is that I serve the institution to engage and empower faculty to contribute to institutional initiatives. So from that lens, culture is a critical factor because culture can be a motivator or a detractor that impacts faculty engagement in this case, in faculty engagement in institutional initiatives and their sense of empowerment to contribute to those institutional initiatives. But personally, why is culture of care important to me? To Haley, the person who loves to hike, go to the gym, and is a mom. And culture of care is important to me because I was a non-traditional student. And I know I would not be where I am today without the faculty and the advisors who cared for me before culture of care was even a thing. And I was able to accomplish my academic goals and my professional goals as a result because of those individuals who took time to see me, to care for me, to figure out what I needed in order to be successful. And so the culture of care, I am also a member of the Culture of Care Council for the institution, is my service to the institution, and it is my opportunity to pay it forward in caring for others. The idea that culture eats strategy for breakfast doesn't suggest that strategy is unimportant. Instead, it highlights that without the right culture, even the most well thought out strategies are at a risk for failure. And we're going to talk more about that and debate that out as we go along here. So together, let's unpack this statement to learn more about what it means to us, how the two concepts of culture and strategy are distinct and yet interconnected. And I'm counting on everyone to chime into the conversation here. All right, so this funny little cartoon is an image of Peter Drucker, who is often the quote "culture eats strategy for breakfast" is often attributed to Peter Drucker, who is known as the father of management. But according to the Drucker Institute, Drucker never said that, and the adage seems more likely derived from a blend of several ideas from several big thinkers. According to the Drucker Institute, what Drucker actually said is more aligned with culture, no matter how defined, is singularly persistent, which isn't quite as catchy as culture eats strategy for breakfast, probably doesn't make us as hungry either. But speaking of who says what, I'd like to hear from you all of who do you think sets the culture of an institution? Is it leadership? Is it the school mascot? Does anyone want to share their thoughts on who or what they believe sets institutional culture? And feel free to come off your mic and or turn on your camera. I'm
Hey,
looking at my participants and
Vaughn,
I know we have some talkers in here.
I would say leadership definitely sets the culture, but they certainly don't set all of it. Your direct manager sets a lot of the culture. The colleagues that you work with across different groups, that sets the culture. Here in our university, students set the culture. So you have different elements of culture coming from different people in different places, all of which combines, but it is certainly leadership that sets that, in my view, that sets the overall tone of what's going to be supported, what's not going to be supported, who is going to be supported, who's not going to be supported, and how.
I
So I'll let
think
somebody
Yeah,
talk too.
I would agree with you, Paul. I think that it is set by leadership. However, I also think that intermittently, as you have that kind of drip, the trickle down of that, you may have some people that don't actually, some leaders that don't reflect the culture of like the big leader, like the head. So you then end up having this kind of fragmented, you know, where you
I,
have some culture that feels good, and then the other is like, oh, I don't want to interact with that person.
I would also think the culture is set by just example. You mentioned leaders, but how many groups you know have designated leaders?
Right.
That's what I think of. It's like, okay, who is the man or woman that is setting the best example for the good of the group, right?
Mhm.
Because point, there are some students in the classroom that set the tone of leadership, but I'm the instructor. I'm the official leader, but a student is taking over because they probably set a good example that everyone wants to follow, that everyone is moving towards. So I would say whatever the example is, it could be a person, place, or even thing or an idea. That's your that's your culture setting guide, so to
Mhm.
speak.
I'm really appreciating these kind of diverse streams that all interact to create an organizational culture. And Allie, I saw that you came off of mute.
Yeah, one thing I thought was interesting from a couple of years ago and under when I was working under Tony is he always wanted the last interview with a new hire because he trusted us to choose who we thought would be best, but he wanted the cultural check at the end, which I thought was really interesting. After we had vetted the person, he just wanted to make sure that he didn't look at their resume and all that kind of stuff, but are they a good cultural fit? So I
Mhm.
think there is a piece about how we all swim in the fishbowl that is our culture, and we might not see it, but we're impacting it. But leaders often have a way to be the final say in some things.
Thanks for sharing that example, Allie. Teresa, Yvonne?
I put in the, I mean, I think it even can go further because I think a lot of times the culture is somehow either whether even if it's not dictated, it's almost fluid, and you think about what's historical and through in society and technology and innovation, policymakers, even professional associations. I think all of those may provide information that's important to the stakeholders. I remember when I was back in the days before when I worked in the hospitals, I think even um, we had an elevator man. We called him, he had a name, but he was the first person that most of the patients and doctors and nurses and staff, everyone saw every morning. He was there first thing in the morning. And he helped set that culture at that hospital. He really did. It was everybody wanted to be like him, do like him, treat people like he did. Including when we'd have surveyors come, they would always compliment him in the way that he greeted them. He would get on the staff for not having their badges. Where's your badge? You can't go upstairs without a badge. So, I mean, it was everything. So sometimes it's just the culture has already been created by someone we don't even recognize yet.
That so connects with me to what Leroy was saying, right? And not every leader has a title. And it sounds like this elevator man, right, was a leader in that cultural space, just because maybe of his values. Who knows what it was, but that's a very vivid example. I appreciate that. All right, I don't want to talk over anyone. But if we look at this slide, you'll see that we've started to name some of the different factors that impact organizational culture. Like the control systems is sort of what popped into my head, Yvonne, when you were talking about accrediting bodies and policies. We've talked about the impact, good or bad, better or worse, that leadership can have on culture through either creating some rub or some or modeling the culture through their different behaviors and their actions. We haven't talked much about symbols and how symbols create organizational culture. I had a coworker, and I'm not sure if they are here right now. I don't want to story steal, but I also don't hesitate to call anyone out either to share their story. They're not here. But they were at the gym this past weekend, I think it was, and they could see across the gym someone was waving at them, like trying to get their attention. And then this person started doing something with their hands, and it was a little confusing, and this person didn't know really what was happening. Anyways, the person came over to her at the gym, and I probably can't do it right, but they were doing the bear down symbol. I don't know if anybody else knows how to do it. Maybe I should have practiced that before the presentation, but they were showing her the bear down symbol because she was wearing a University of Arizona t-shirt while she was working out. And so that so resonated with me about the symbols, right? That can define our organizational culture. Any other thoughts on symbols? Or anything else come to mind with these four different, just some examples of different areas, how organizational culture is influenced or impacted? Okay. Well, when we think about organizational culture, there are some organizations that are known for their culture. Any examples come to mind for anyone?
I want to share a quick shout out to some old colleagues at the University of California, San Diego Neurology Department, because they had such an intense focus on their patients and their patients' welfare. It was just amazing. I went to a meeting with them. We were working with them on a project to do Parkinson's disease research, and I wanted to go hear what they did. at their patient meetings. They wasted no time at all. They got down to business, in under 60 seconds, and they spent the entire hour just focusing nonstop, relentless focus on how they can help this patient, that patient, this patient, that patient. They went through everybody's case history, and it was just an amazing, intense focus. And I've thought of that as this is what we need to do in our school for our students, just this intense focus on delivering great value, the best value that we can give to our students, and just block out so much else and just focus on that. So I've taken their lesson, and I love when I see that here. And I see that in our learning mate conversations. I see that in a lot of departmental meetings, just that intense focus on helping the people that we're here to help.
Right. Yeah, Paul, there's no mistaking culturally what we're here to do when you're describing that focus. I see some other examples in the chat, Nike, Nordstrom's, and probably about 20 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer. The CEO of Starbucks, Schultz, at the time, wrote a book about Starbucks culture. I had the opportunity to visit the Zappos headquarters outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, who is also known for their culture. The quote at the top of the screen says, "If you get the culture right, most of the other stuff will just take care of itself." That's Tony Heesh, the CEO of Zappos, or was the CEO at the time. And believe me, when you enter that building, you know that you are in a different culture. Zappos interviewing process starts with a cultural fit interview, which actually carries half the weight of the decision. So Allie, to your example earlier, how Tony Farrell, the dean of our College of Arts and Sciences and interim dean for the Forbes School right now, took a similar approach in making sure that individuals who were wanting to join the team were a good cultural fit. But Zappos takes it even a bit further. They put their employees through a week of training, and if the employee feels that the job is not for them, they will offer that new employee $2,000 to leave, to quit after the first week. That's how important their organizational culture is to them. They arrived several years ago at 10 core values that they use to guide their culture. And one of those values is to be weird. Another one is to be creative. The CEO, Tony Heesh again at the time, was so dedicated to transparency that his desk sits in the middle of a field of cubes. I've been to the cube field. You can feel the culture in the air. They also have refrigerators on their floor where you can store your vodka and your Red Bull. So that is definitely, a unique cultural routine, right? What are some other common routines or rituals in your team or organization that you can think of?
Haley, this is Yvonne again. I really like phone calls. Just sometimes it's better, it's just a better way to connect I mean, that might be old school for some people, but I think when you can connect with them by phone, if they can't meet by Zoom, it goes a long way with associate faculty, it goes a long way with full-time faculty, and I like to connect with my chairs a lot of times by phone. And we end up talking about sometimes 5% of it's work, the rest of it is just like what's going on in our lives. It goes a long way. That kind of connection, I think. And you can do that with anybody that's willing.
I think you can too. And I want to circle back on that. And I want to hear a couple other routines that we can think of that define different organizations, cultures. Not define.
This really is not a routine, but as someone that might be the person that's been here the least out of everybody I'm seeing on the screen, I've been here almost 3 years, and I worked in-person education, and the casual chats, passing each other in the hall, at the coffee machine, whatever, those things don't happen in online. And when I first started working here, we would start a meeting And my instinct is we got to start the meeting. Like, let's not do this chit chat. But now I cherish the 5 minutes of chit chat
Sure.
beginning of every meeting. And I actually like make sure that there is some casual conversation because I think that is an important component of working with other people. And I've come to really appreciate those casual conversations. Just 5 minutes of getting to know each other a little bit more goes a long way.
I think so too. And at UAGC, I hear that, all right, I observe that we like to talk about the weather a lot when we open our meetings. But the point of these sort of rituals and routines is because it's connected to a larger outcome. We talk about the weather because we're spread out across the United States and we're actually trying to find a way to connect with one another. If we were to Marie's point on campus, we might not, maybe we would talk about the weather, but maybe we wouldn't because we would all know that it was raining outside or that it was snowing where Jody lives, right? Versus it being 74 degrees for me today, that sort of thing. And so Marie and Yvonne, what you both identified in some of those routines or rituals that inform or support our organization, that there's an intention behind them. Just like in the story I shared earlier today, or earlier when we started, is that there is an intention behind taking someone's personal car, going to pick up that president from the airport. And it was because we do these things because it supports our organizational culture. And Teresa, I was scrolling back to your comment in the chat about the big C and the little c, and that I read it really quickly, but yeah, that seemingly the small things that we do together end up making a larger impact on the organizational culture. I'm seeing it.
Haley,
Yes.
I would love to chime in for just a really quick second. I have had the joy and displeasure over the last 3 years see a school take off and a school close. And I can tell you culture was a core component. The culture where the president spends time every week with his cabinet and gives them the resources to do the initiatives that he thinks are important for the school, that school is thriving. The school where the president isolated themselves and I would say was a bit in a delusional bubble of, well, we survived through COVID, therefore we can survive any other changes and shifts coming in higher ed, did not give himself opportunities and was not open to hearing from the rest of the people on his staff, and certainly was not present on campus with the students. And culture is what you do every single day. It's not what you say, it's what you do. And it really goes back to walking the talk. And those who can say great things and make it sound all good, but they don't have any action behind it, I think really can have really bad consequences. And so I'm really excited. Culture of care has been a core. Every student feels it in every class I've ever been in. The staff, I feel that UAGC really made their mark with culture of care. They've done a great job.
Thank you for sharing your insights, Jody. There's two threads sort of that I want to pull on. One is your comment about the president who met with their cabinet or their team and listened to them and provided resources, because to me, resources starts to connect with strategy. And this time is going by so quickly. I do want to talk a little bit about strategy, but what I'm hearing is that from everyone is that an organization's culture has the power to help people want to come to work every day, to invest their time and energy and expertise. And that helps me segue to this piece about, about strategy. And if we think about strategy as an ongoing process, Marie, feel free to jump in here. You may have a more fully fleshed out definition of strategy. It's the process of setting an organization's goals, developing plans of action, and then to Jody's point, effectively allocating resources to execute those plans. And of course, I'm not going to leave it out, measuring the impact that we have with those. So, I mean, that sounds so simple, right? We'll just high level goals, develop some plans of action. We're going to anticipate that there won't be any disruptors. Someone brought to our attention COVID earlier. That's a tremendous example of something that interrupted a lot of institutions, and I'm not just speaking of educational institutions, strategies, right? And so earlier today, Caleb Simmons with Arizona Online shared that our North Star isn't revenue, which is something that is typically associated with an organization's high-level goals, right, with its strategy, and that at UAGC and at AZO, that our North Star is caring about individuals, which I just think is really an excellent example of how culture drives strategy, and that we're taking a student-first approach versus an institution first approach, and that approach does impact our culture. And so I'm wondering if we have a few minutes to talk about one small change in strategy that could make a big difference in your organization's culture. I did a hop, skip, and a jump there, but let's think about one small change in strategy that could make a big difference in your organization's culture.
I think for us, I have the great opportunity to work with our student success committee. And for us, thinking about policies that we have in place that were created because they make sense to us, but stopping and putting it from the viewpoint of the student. If we really are student first, our policies should be to the benefit of our students, not to us because it's easy or this is how we always done it, or any of those, plenty of reasons that way. But we've come up with some great new ideas just from flipping that switch to think about it from the viewpoint of the student, which sounds so simple, but it's hard when you get caught up in your daily work to think about viewing it from a different viewpoint.
It is. That's an excellent example. I'm getting a 1-minute warning. So I knew this was going to happen, that I would get too excited about organizational culture, not leave enough time to talk about organizational culture. So I apologize, but our conversation does not have to end here. So my challenge to you today, as you walk away, is to reflect and observe how organizational culture impacts your own work approach, and to share your insights with me. I've put my email or my Instagram handle here on the slide. I'm very passionate about staying connected and creating community. And so please feel free to reach out to me and share your reflections and observations. And also, maybe a couple of you would like to share one insight you will take away with you today from our conversation.
Wow, I mean, how do you follow that, Paul? How do you follow that?
I'm glad you get to follow that.
Oh, yeah, put the burden on me. I know people kind of looking at me with the people's eyebrow.
All eyes on you, Leroy.
Oh, but it's all good though. It's all good. So somebody has to be the bad guy. So I want to be the Joker to the Batman today. This was the most teachable and engaging session I've ever been in. Like, I mean, all the sessions are teachable and engaging, but I don't think we pay enough attention to culture. I really don't think we pay enough attention, because it's it's like sometimes we always think that culture is that, oh, we don't need to pay attention to that. Oh, that doesn't do anything. Well, to be honest, from a financial guy, it's like culture can sometimes cost you millions, right? People have to want to come to work. Students have to want to be taught. And if they don't feel comfortable around where they are, or if they don't feel that the examples that they see are fitting them, well, I mean, all the marketing in the world won't really help you. So I think not only Haley introduced a couple of good sessions that I would say, and I'm not going to even say food for thought, let's just say buffet for thought. It was too bad that we had to kind of wrap it up because like I can see this being 1.5 hours easy from an IO. So Haley, a heartfelt thank you from Dr.
My
Greenberg,
pleasure.
myself, and the rest of us who are really, really still want to be engaged. I'm seeing the faces like, come on, Leroy, 5 more minutes. Please, just 5 more minutes, Leroy. But unfortunately, I can't. My hands are tied. So, just thank you for sharing that culture strategy for breakfast. Like I said, Haley does have an email address, and I saw a little Instagram up there. So do not be afraid to reach out to Haley. I don't know, maybe a podcast can come out of this. I'm just saying. But it was exciting, it was fun, and we really, really, really appreciate you sharing this with us.
Well, thanks, Leroy. And I see some items in the chat about day 2 tomorrow, and there's a form. Oh, for the Clifford Blizzard Award. So thank you for sharing that information. Enjoy your day, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you all.